Hey everyone, so today we're going to go over some Bitcoin technical analysis, and I've talked about doing technical analysis a couple times on our channel here, and I'm joined by Matt McGuire today. He's another member like myself with the Chart Guys community. But yeah, today we're going to go over a couple different crypto charts. And the idea here is to do some really simple technical analysis just so that people who aren't big into watching crypto at all times can kind of get a glimpse as to where the market is and what two traders' perspectives are on good entries for longer term swings instead of having to worry about looking at the market every single day or every couple minutes. So also, Matt, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me, Julian. Looking forward to this. I know we've been talking about it for some time, and I am definitely a fan of the channel. I'm happy that I get to be on it because this is where I'm fairly new to the crypto space. I'm not really someone who has been in it for nearly as long as many of you guys are, but one thing I do know is charts. So I feel like this is a great trade-off because I get to learn about fundamentals and upcoming events and get my feet wet in the space while looking at charts and patterns and helping you guys invest or trade more profitably would be the goal.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, for those who are in the stock world, one of the most interesting events that's coming up for Bitcoin is this thing called a halving, and if you can kind of think of it as the opposite of what a share unlock would be, where a share unlock is a whole bunch of new supply coming onto the market. On about May, I think early May of this year, the supply and the issuance rate of Bitcoin gets cut in half. So there's been a lot of activity in Bitcoin over the last few weeks. It's run about 40% this year. And the idea is that when this supply rate cut happens around May, around this time, it could lead to some pretty big movements in the price. It could either mean it could be a sell the news event, or it could mean that the demand side keeps where it's at and the supply side gets cut, and that could mean a giant surge in price. We don't know. We're just going to react to things as they come. But it's interesting seeing how the setup is playing into that. So how do you want to start? Do you want to kind of go with the daily and move up to the monthly, or kind of work backwards?
Yeah, let's do top down. Let's go to the monthly
Cool.
and get the bigger picture of what we're looking at.
Awesome.
And then we'll zoom in from there and look at today's situation.
Fantastic. Cool. So
So,
yeah. Do you want to go first for this one?
yeah, for
Sweet.
sure. So monthly time frame here. Any of you who are not familiar with technical analysis might be asking yourselves, what the hell's going on here? And totally get it. Don't worry. The key thing I'm looking at here is what Julian and I call an equilibrium. So you have this tightening range where you have this high, you have a low, you have a lower high, and a higher low. And you see as the price moves, it's getting constricted tighter and tighter within this channel. And you can think of this as a rubber band effect, where you have a rubber band that's being pulled significantly one way and significantly another way. And as the rubber band gets tighter and tighter within this area, and just imagine my lines here, not saying price will follow this, but as eventually as price gets tighter, you get to an apex point here. And basically, if you're stretching a rubber band between your two hands, one hand's going to give eventually, and the rubber band is going to snap with incredible velocity towards the hand that's still holding it. And that's what we're looking for. So we would anticipate if one of these levels breaks, and that would be the 13,970, or not quite sure what this level is here. I think it is
About
64.35.
64.35.
When we get a break of one of those levels, we can expect some pretty significant follow through in the move, depending on which way that breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would be looking at on this chart here is in my opinion, the most likely scenario would be a lower high below 13,970. If we were to just break that level and maybe a rejection and then a break, that would be significant. And that would be perhaps the scenario that you were talking about fundamentally a few minutes ago, where we have less supply of Bitcoin, but the demand remains the same. Therefore, the price is going to respond to that in the form of a bull break.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, if we reject and it ends up being a sell the news event, I would be looking for a pattern to continue tightening up and a new support above that 64.35. One thing I did notice though is ever since we hit the top back in June of last year, we have all these upper wicks. And what a wick is on a candle, it means the price went up to there, but it came back down and it closed here.
Mm-hmm.
So the candle shows you the open, high, the low, and the close. The high is easy to see, and the low is easy to see. The open, if it's a green candle, is right here. If it's a red candle, it's up at the top of the real body. And the close, if it's a green candle, is above the open because we closed green, we closed higher than we opened. And if it's a red candle, then the close is below the open.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes sense with all the lines I've drawn on the screen.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe just
but
another thing to like visualize this. So we can see this is a big candle here in June. So to kind of process what that would look like is you can imagine. Oh, sorry about that. Wow, I have a timer going off. What I was going to say is basically you could have a month of June here, basically. And so the bottom of this candle would tell you this is where the price was as soon as the clock turned, and it was June 1st, 12 a.m. And I believe June has 30 days. So the last day of June would be where this candle closes. This would be June 30th, would be right around right here. In between June 1st and June 30th, we hit the price here and we hit a price here. That was the highest price we hit in June. That was the lowest price we hit in June. So just a little extra way of explaining it.
yeah, absolutely. And inside each one of these monthly candles, we have a daily candle, and we'll look at those in a second.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing that stands out to me on this chart, as I mentioned, all these upper wicks where the price went up, but people were selling into that strength. And then I look at this candle here last month in January, and this is a very strong close up near the high of the month for the first time in probably since back here in May of last year. So that was
Yeah.
notable to me. It'll be interesting to see how February closes. Again, I am expecting a lower high compared to 1397.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be watching these wicks and this volume as well for that.
Yeah, and just a quick plug too. The Chart Guys has an excellent course on understanding candles because different shapes generally can mean different things. It can tell you what the likelihood of the next candle could possibly look like. Generally, there's certain things, basic ones I would call Maribozus and reversal candles, where reversal candles are basically where you would open at one point, somewhere in the middle of the month you would hit up really high, but close really near the low, so you get this really big upper wick. You could think of this one, this is the top of Bitcoin in 2017, as potentially a reversal candle. I would say the body's a little bit too big. I would want to close down the low to call it a classic one. But what those candle shapes usually indicate is the likelihood being high for a move in one direction or another. You have a big upper wick, you're likely looking at a worse month on the downside, which kind of happened here in 2017. These upper wicks obviously signify that the price, moved, but it couldn't hold the highs, and so it generally indicates that lower prices could be coming. And it works the same to the downside. You can have lower wicks and closes near the high, and it'll mean prices might move higher. Maribozu candles are candles where basically the price closes near the highest point, and those very highly suggest that a move higher is imminent. So this candle right here for January closed pretty close to the high. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but as you can see, high likelihood of it moving higher if it does close, which it did. So yeah. Cool. So yeah, we're looking at Bitcoin on the monthly here. We've got this tightening pattern between the crypto euphoria highs, the 2018 bear market lows, the little comeback in 2019, and kind of the slowdown all through the fall and winter, and then kind of a resurgence back here January, February. Let's see what we see on the weekly. So what do you kind of make of the weekly here? We kind of have a bit of a I don't think it's as pronounced on the other exchanges, but we have a bit of a double bottom here where the price tested around 64.35. It's about 2% ish double bottom here.
No,
Um,
that's close enough for me.
yeah.
What this chart demonstrates to me is that that's an area of pretty considerable support. And you can see here, we did have that weekly downtrend where we had every little bounce was a lower high on this weekly chart. And
Mm-hmm.
that continued. And then something shifted.
Yeah.
We did not break down to a lower low. And you see, after each one of these wicks, we do break down to a lower low.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately that stopped. And this here is what changed this chart for the bulls. And that's when we saw the momentum shift after holding that base, testing it twice, 64.35 from the monthly chart. This is what it looks like on the weekly chart. So you can see here we have had 4 out of 5 green weeks in a row with a big bull push, and now some pretty healthy consolidation. So what that means is the price isn't continuing to move up, it's dropping, but it's still very healthy. And if you don't mind, Julian,
Mm-hmm.
just hit the auto button down at the bottom right for me. That didn't really do what I wanted it to. But we do have this nice healthy channel of consolidation where you can see there's profit taking and buying of a dip, profit taking, buying of a dip. Can you actually see the pencil with my mouse moving or no?
I can see the green line.
That's it. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm actually animating my mouse here,
Yeah,
but
yeah, you have to be
you
clicking.
can't see it, so I
Yeah.
apologize about it.
No worries.
But anyway, yeah, so there is this channel here that we're consolidating in, and that's very healthy. We have these exponential moving averages here on the weekly time frame. The 12 is this top one up here.
But
My wife.
Matt, what are exponential, weekly, or moving averages?
What these are a lagging indicator. So this one up here, the top one, is the 12, and this one down here is the 26. So what that means is for this bluish greenish line here, it factors in the last 12 candles of price action, but their weight exponentially greater based on how recent they are. So this candle would have the most weighting. This one would be number 2. This one would be number 3, all the way to the 12th candle, wherever it is, which would have the least weight in that calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is a lagging indicator. You can see we got a bullish cross where the 12 was below. We got the bullish cross right here. But really, we had the price action bull break 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
So it's a lagging indicator, but it does show, it does speak to the trend of the price action. And right now that is bullish and we have healthy consolidation. So what I would be looking for would be the likelihood of a back test. Once we broke above this resistance, we did back test it here. On this healthy channel of consolidation, I would be looking for a back test somewhere along there before the bulls try to see another push up to higher highs. And that will be the test. Can they break to higher highs above the high set a couple weeks ago? Or will we have to zoom into the daily chart and look for a pattern forming there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just a couple things on exponential moving averages. You're probably thinking, why are they certain numbers? Why 12, for the green one, and why 26 for the orange one? There's no right and wrong way to pick these things, but generally I want to look to what are professional traders doing and what are institutions doing and what are the trading platforms doing. The 12 exponential moving average and the 26 exponential moving average are the default averages for Coinbase. So they're an average that obviously a lot of people are watching, because anybody using Coinbase, if they want to just have a default chart, they're going to have these lines just pop up automatically. I believe to some extent BitMEX has those as well if you start putting EMAs on those charts. So I think they're very important indicators. I've actually used them outside crypto a lot as well. There's other ones, prices don't always hit them perfectly. Prices might go under them or above them, but I find there's a lot of action in the crypto space where you can use those indicators to really nail what the consolidation levels are going to be. Personally, I'm the type of trader who I don't like to chase big movements. I don't like to kind of, buy super strong into strength. I like to buy into strength, but I like to buy when the strength is cooling off a little bit and is preparing for its next run upwards. And so what I look for is healthy sideways consolidation, kind of like this, not dramatic drops, and potentially setting orders to buy around these areas of the 12 EMA and the 26 EMA. A couple examples of how great this indicator is, in my opinion, is you can see kind of as the crypto price was melting down kind of through 2018, how the 12 EMA was a pretty strong resistance here in this very tightening equilibrium zone before the price broke from $6,000 subsequently to about $3,000. You can see how the price kind of was a little bit squished within the 12 EMA as it was a resistance on the way down before it eventually broke out. And once it broke out, once the 12 EMA crossed the 26 EMA, it was a pretty good area to be buying on the weekly as well. As you can see on the little pullback here, we didn't quite make it, but if you set a little bit above it, you would have snagged some. And then, of course, if you had snagged, the consolidation off of the climax top in June of 2019, we hit that weekly 12 EMA and we tapped it 3 times, basically within 1%, before having a great bounce from around 9,300 to about 12,000. And so, I really like this indicator as just a way of telling what the momentum is in the macro term. So when people say we're in like a bull market or a bear market, it's usually because the 12 EMA is over the 26 for a bull market, or the 12 EMA is under the 26 for a bear market. It's just a good way of gauging sentiment as well as trading. Awesome. We'll move it right along. We kind of got on for the basics here. But on the daily, what do we kind of see on Bitcoin?
Daily, I don't like because it's a little bit choppy. The one thing that stands out to me here is we are holding the 26 period. EMA, we are wicking below it, but bulls are currently finding value in this area and buying the dips below there. And we do have lower highs on each little bounce. So it's not a nice downtrend. It is a downtrend. Let's take a look at the 12-hour, get a little bit more detail. So each one of these daily candles, we're going to cut in half. 2 12 hours will make up a single daily candle. And here's where I get a little bit more information, where we have the clear 12-hour downtrend with a lower high, a lower low, and potentially setting a lower high. Might not be set yet, but I would expect a lower high below this 1025 level up here. One thing I'm noticing, though, is this was a pretty important support, the bottom of this green candle, and the bear break of that didn't get much follow through. Bulls bought that up pretty quickly, and I don't think we closed a single candle under that low. So right now in the short term, 93.50 is the most important support level for me, and 10,250 is the most important resistance for me. So we're really looking for another one of those equilibriums or those rubber band patterns where if bulls can get a little bit more follow through on this move up, we'll be looking for the probability of a higher low above 93.50 and then a tightening range. And we'll see one of those rubber band patterns that we're watching on the big time frame, the monthly time frame. We can see one of those potentially set up on the daily time frame to give people who are new to technical analysis and charts an example of what that looks like and what the break of that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a pretty good example of this is basically, I guess you're looking from about June to September of 2019. So sometimes these equilibrium tightening rubber band patterns can have bias in certain directions, and we would call these moves ascending or descending triangles rather than kind of a classical pennants or equilibriums, which is what the rubber band thing that we're referring to. So you can see an example of how these patterns can have enormous follow through by kind of seeing how we have the high here, a low here, kind of a lower high, higher lows, lower highs, and then it's really, really tight here. Like Bitcoin is not moving more than 1% a day here for almost a week and a half. And then we see that rubber band snap downwards, viciously destroying, 90.60 support, 93.20 support, cratering down from around, $10,000 to about 7,700 in a couple days. So it's the reason that these patterns are kind of important to watch, is because they can definitely mean an increase of volatility in the short term. They don't tell you things forever, but this break was a really good point to get out. I really think, I think I took a little bit off around here. And, we had a bit of a weird move in October. I don't know what exactly that was on, but you can see just the follow through from this move of the tightening pattern breaking. We're down at about $6,500 a few weeks and months after that move. So, yeah, it's a good one to watch. One thing I wanted to just cover here on the daily is that we have a couple important levels, I think, for this week coming up. So we'll try and do these videos once a week, but I think if you are not super into watching charts every single day, but want kind of alerts to kind of get a sense of where the market is going, I would say the three most important levels to watch for this week are going to be 93.50. That's a level you don't want to break necessarily. We have to see how much follow through that break gets, but if that level breaks, it's not looking good for crypto for the next, I would say, few days, weeks, maybe. Definitely depends on how far we dip under that, but that's just a key support level, I would say. Short-term resistance, I would like to see 10,250 break, and then obviously if 10,500 breaks, it's a really good sign for the bulls. So those to me are the simple levels to watch this week.
Yeah, and if that 93.50 support breaks, we have another level shortly behind it at 90.93. I'd call that 9,000 psychological. If bulls lose support but can hold 9,000, the weekly chart remains perfectly fine. The daily chart is cooling off a little bit. You see we have this indicator down here called RSI, which is Relative Strength Index. And generally, when you're up here in the black area, that's when you generally tend to be cautious and you look for a reset of the RSI, which we now have. But the reset of RSI always comes with a pullback in price. Or if you're a little extended to the downside, a reset of the RSI could look like a little bounce in the price. So even if we do lose this level, if we can hold just below that wick, if we can hold this 9,000 psychological area here, bulls are just fine on the weekly time frame.
Yeah, agree for sure. One of the other reasons I like that 90.93 area as well is because if you look at that as a potential support level, you zoom out to the weekly, it lines up really well with that 12 EMA at about 90.96. So if we were to get a bear break there, definitely keep that 9,000 to 9,100 area in watch. You definitely don't want to see a 9,000 break, but that could be a potential area where we see a lot of action. We see a lot of dip buyers come in to kind of hold that area, prove their strength, and then look for maybe a lower high on the weekly. Just because I would say if we broke the support level down here, I would say not super convincing that we're going to just break straight to higher highs on the weekly. I would say we might tighten up a little bit more. You got about another $1,500 range in there.
Yeah, I think that there would be some lost confidence in the short term
for sure
momentum of Bitcoin.
Cool. Alrighty, let's zoom out to some other coins real quick here. We have Ethereum. Ethereum's had a pretty mind-blowing run since hitting its bottom kind of back here in mid-December. We've gone from $116 to around $200, $288. So you're looking at 120, 130% run up. This is the hottest that Ethereum has been in a very long time. I'm looking at the Binance chart, but Binance didn't even have Ethereum until about August 14th, when about the exchange launched. So you can look back at this chart since 2017. Ethereum has never had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, almost nine consecutive green weeks in a row. Even back when the price was going from $270 to $1,400 in a matter of weeks. So what could that mean? It means obviously the price is very bullish in kind of the midterm, but it could possibly be on a fundamental basis, people accumulating it for upcoming events. There's Ethereum 2.0 launch coming off. It's not quite like the halvening, but it's a reason to own Ethereum. And yeah, overall looking pretty bullish. And on the daily, it was even, really extended up here with the RSI. And I would say even on this consolidation, it's pretty healthy. But yeah, just keep in mind, obviously, we're coming off a pretty spectacular 100% plus run in this one. What do you think?
Nice chart.
Yeah.
Nice chart. Let's look at the monthly here because we're in a similar setup to Bitcoin where we're looking for the rubber band equilibrium. And I would say that the most likely scenario would be a lower high below 366.80. One thing I am noticing is this volume moving average here, this yellow line is increasing, and we do have increasing bull volume in January and in February, which isn't even finished yet. That is one thing that says we may be able to push higher than we would otherwise anticipate. So I'm going to be watching the volume on the monthly timeframes for sort of the bigger picture while watching the trends on the daily and weekly and even the 12-hour timeframes for Ethereum. Because I still believe that we are more likely than not to set a lower high compared to that upper three level.
This is a very good one if you're kind of looking to just kind of give it a proof of concept for technical analysis. You're going to have a really good example of this rubber band break, I believe, sometime this week coming up. So if it's Sunday, recording this. So basically from the 14th of February to about now the 23rd, we've had a price set a top, a low, a lower high, a higher low, potentially a lower high here. It's not 100% confirmed yet, but as you can see, perfect illustration here of this rubber band tightening. And I would look for a break either near the end of this week or early March. And that can kind of tell you, some indications of momentum. I would say a bear break could bring us to consolidate quite a bit. However, I would say consolidation on the weekly wouldn't be a terrible thing. The 12 EMA is down at $209. So we could theoretically drop 20-ish% from that tightening break and still be okay on the weekly. It could be a weekly high or low. A bull break would be pretty phenomenal, looking at about, I would say, around $300 as a nearby resistance. We have a couple other levels here, 318. And then, of course, the high of last year, 366. But yeah, I would say, like Matt was saying, the volume is definitely one to watch here. It's been picking up quite rapidly. Yeah, I would say, the RSI got extremely high on Ethereum. I definitely tried shorting it a little too early, but when you get high RSI or low RSI on these charts, it means that volatility is to be expected. It means that you have a bit of a chart here, which maybe you can draw it with your pencil tool, resembles a bit of a parabola moving upwards. But basically, think of like a big skateboard ramp, right? When you go to the top, eventually things must come down. They come down the other direction sometimes, or sometimes they can stay really healthy. But generally, when you get these kind of parabolic, steadily increasing steep moves upwards, they come with a lot of action in the short term. Another one we'll look at.
On our side here, we were hot, like you mentioned. That doesn't mean we have to have a pullback to cool it off, because this really sideways trading you could consider. And sure, if you ended up, unfortunately, with an average at 288, sure, this was a big drop and potentially painful. But when you look at the bigger macro picture here and you see after where we came from, there as well. After where we came from, 116 up to 366, 368.
Or 288, yeah.
No, sorry, 288. I'm confusing that with this number back here. And you see where we came from here, and then a couple weeks of sideways. This is very, very healthy. And you can see how far detached we are from these weekly EMAs down here. And Ethereum is still holding the daily EMA 12, which is the faster moving average. Bitcoin lost it.
Yeah. Yeah, so despite this huge move up in Ethereum, which might look a little crazy, it is much healthier than Bitcoin in quite a few different ways. Um, where Bitcoin has crossed bearish on, we'll zoom into the 12 hour for this one. It's crossed bearish on this 12 hour, first time since beginning of this year. Ethereum's looking fine. It's even holding it potentially as support on this recent candle. But yeah, it's holding it fine. It's been obviously a lot more bullish than Bitcoin in the recent weeks. And I would say just really quick, jumping over to another chart where you can compare the price of Ethereum to Bitcoin. So that is how much Bitcoin it costs to buy one Ether. It's about 0.024. At the lows, it costs about 0.027 Bitcoin to buy one. This ratio has been a thing of beauty to watch on Bitcoin, because basically you can look at around the time Ethereum kind of hit notoriety in about early 2017. We had a massive run up where it would cost you, more than a tenth of a Bitcoin to buy one Ethereum. That collapsed down to, 20th or a lot less of a Bitcoin to buy one Ether. A lower high here, higher low, tightening pattern, and we kind of lost that support of 0.0239 and fell down to a really low price here. But you can see after a lot of downtrend of the Ethereum bubble bursting, a lot of that, if you remember from 2017, is initial coin offerings, a couple scammy offers. A lot of people wanted Ethereum just so they could buy other cryptocurrencies, and once that system kind of fell apart, the need for Ethereum wasn't as high. And you can see how, on the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin has fallen a lot less in value from the top of 2017 than Ethereum has. However, on the monthly basis, Ethereum has made a monthly trend change. So we have a monthly low here, kind of a lower high, higher low, and a higher high now. So things are perking up a little bit for Ethereum in comparison to Bitcoin, as well as just
Yeah.
the dollar price.
Over the years, Bitcoin has outperformed Ethereum, but in 2020, that's not the case.
Yeah. So I think Bitcoin is up around 40, 50% for 2020, and Ethereum is, over 100% for this year. So
Yeah.
almost
And if you're
outperformed it
ever
by
not
twice.
sure of that, you can chart Ethereum instead of against the US dollar or against Tether, you can chart it against Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
ETH, BTC.
Yeah, and that can just tell you the strength against good old Bitcoin. I think there's a similar story for Litecoin, where Litecoin has also pretty drastically outperformed Bitcoin as well. So on Litecoin, we can kind of zoom in a little bit here. Well, actually, we can start on the monthly, where, why don't you take it over, Matt?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the exact same thing here. I'm looking for this tightening range. We've got our low, high, higher low, and I'm looking for a lower high somewhere below 145.90.
Mm-hmm.
So that could form here at 76.70, or it could form up at 125. So a lot of room here, but I would be saying that the most likely scenario would be a rejection and a lower high below this level.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm noting, we do have pretty significant volume here in the January and February candles, but what is this line here? Just on the last two candles. Is that the 26 period on the monthly?
I think it is, yes. Yeah, so this
So,
is not the most historical chart of Litecoin. Litecoin's been around since 2011, and this chart started in 2017.
yep, fair enough. So we are touching that and rejecting from it. And these EMAs can be solid walls of support and solid walls of resistance because, like you said, everybody is looking at them. These are the default EMAs on the very first and most popular crypto exchanges, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
pretty sure I got that right. Um, they're what I use when I trade crypto. They're what I use when I trade stocks, and I find they work well. And they're serious levels of support and resistance. And you can see that's where we started to get that pullback and that profit taking
Mm-hmm.
on this February monthly candle.
Yeah, for those who trade Litecoin, probably know that Litecoin can do similar moves to Bitcoin. The charts have fairly decent correlation. I would say the big differences are that Litecoin obviously has a lot more volatile moves, going from about $22 at the bottom of the bear market to about 145. So that's a huge, huge gain relative to Bitcoin's 3,000 to about 13,000. Um, but the other thing I would say with Litecoin is it can often be a runner or a foretelling sign of where Bitcoin is going to go before Bitcoin does. If you were around in 2019, you knew that Bitcoin didn't really break out of that 3,000, 4,000 range till about April.
February, March, April, yeah.
Yeah. But Litecoin started plucking its way out of that range in about January, February. And so Litecoin had about 4 months on Bitcoin. And if you really zoom into like the daily and the weekly, I believe Litecoin topped out quite a few days before Bitcoin did at around 13,000 and started consolidating. Compared to Ethereum and Bitcoin, Litecoin has been a lot weaker on the weekly. It gave back a huge portion of that move, going from 22 to 145 to 35. That's definitely not, not ideal. That's a massive drop here. But you can see out of Ethereum and Bitcoin, where Litecoin is today is a lot further away from that resistance back in 2019. I think Ethereum and Bitcoin both need about 35% to get there. Litecoin basically has to double in order to get to monthly resistance. So Litecoin, it was very strong early 2019 compared to the other ones, but now it's kind of fallen behind, and it's the weakest one out of the big three, I would say.
So that's a good point. Let's get back to that in a second. But before we start comparing the coins to each other, let's check out the weekly chart here on Litecoin and see what is setting up here.
Mm-hmm.
So we did find a top on roughly the same candle that Bitcoin did. Maybe one extra candle before we got that red spinning top there.
Mm-hmm.
Both bought the dip, and we didn't quite hit that weekly EMA, but we came pretty close to that. And essentially, after breaking above it, this is really a dip buy to test it as support.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that bull cross here, that red dot. We have the bull cross of those EMAs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is likely to follow Bitcoin. So we may come back down. And again, I'm not predicting, but just knowing the pattern that Bitcoin is currently in and knowing the pattern that Ethereum is currently in, we may get a few wicks down to test this level to make sure it really is support. Test the demand zone. Is there really demand here? Are people still buying Litecoin here after such a pretty good move? And you mentioned that it's got to double to get back to 2019 highs.
Mm-hmm.
It's already doubled in the past 2.5 months.
Yeah, more than that.
Are people still interested as buyers? So we may see a few more tests over the next week or two of this level to ensure that there is proper demand for a continued upward price movement.
Yeah, and I would say too, just something it's interesting is that depending on what type of trader you are, if you are, want to get into these things long term or short term, you have to kind of decide, do you want to be the person that buys the strongest names that are coming down to healthily consolidate on the weekly, or do you want to buy the weakest names? So for me personally, I've used to be one of those people who really like buying these oversold dips. So seeing these names like Litecoin get absolutely crushed on the weekly, thinking that, okay, this has been so hammered down that when this hits a bottom, there will be so few sellers left that the buyers are going to have so much power to raise the price up. And that can be true in certain instances. I think on Litecoin, it was a lot more crushed, I believe, than Ethereum and Bitcoin relative to the 2017 highs. You're looking at $420 down to about $22, so 95% or so drawdown. And consequently, it was one of the biggest bouncers if you look on the monthly time frame. This doesn't even count the actual high of Litecoin, which was about 420. But again, absolutely crushed on the way down and massive returns to the upside. So there are perks in kind of buying these weaker names on the consolidation and looking for these high bounces, but just keep in mind that, you're almost never going to buy the bottom. So if you're looking to get into these long-term positions on consolidation, you have to have stop losses. You have to have levels that you say, okay, I don't want to take this pain. I will let it run its course before I decide I want to buy back in. Me personally, I look at all these charts and I think Ethereum is the one that I really want to get on consolidation because it has just been an absolute powerhouse, and I don't think that you have a setup like this and then just a straight shot back down. I think you can pull back pretty healthily, test that weekly 12 as support, and then when things pick up again, theoretically, let's just say if the crypto market consolidates on the weekly, Ethereum, I believe, would be the strongest one moving forward in terms of just going off of the previous trend. But yeah,
Let's
just my
take a
2
look at the
cents.
daily graph.
The daily on Litecoin?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so this one's a
So
little bit interesting because we actually broke to lower lows, but it looks like we actually did break lower highs here. Almost a double top, though, I would say. Yeah, about a double top. We broke it by
So
about
kind of
70
like we
cents.
broke to lower lows when we broke that support and got no follow through. We did break to higher highs. That's not a great line because it's pretty thick, but we
Mm-hmm.
didn't really get a lot of follow through. And you can see the price has come back within this pattern here
Mm-hmm.
off of, guess what, this 12 period EMA here.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be interesting to watch how this sets up. Let's look for more detail here. Let's look at the 12,
Mm-hmm.
see if that gives us clues. And so this is it. This was, what is that, 50, 60 hours of buying pressure in a row.
Yeah.
So of course that break did not get a lot of follow through, and we're looking for that consolidation now. What I don't like here is this volume, because we've almost matched the bull break candle,
Mm-hmm.
and we have 8 hours left. So
Mm-hmm.
that means in 4 hours of red, we've had as much Litecoin traded as we did in 12 hours of green previously. So that is a little bit of a red flag for the short term. Let's look at the 4 hour chart and see how that actually looks.
Oh, we're zooming in a lot here. Yeah,
And here you have
big
that
red candle.
volume spike. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one thing I'd be cautious of. And it almost looks like the Litecoin bulls got a little bit too eager. The Ethereum bulls, the Bitcoin bulls weren't quite of the same mindset. And Litecoin bulls thought, you know what, maybe this wasn't the right move. Nice rejection here from $80 psychological too. So that break did not get a lot of follow through. It was only 55 cents. Nice round number to reject from. And consolidated for a few hours, tried it again, another rejection. And I think that's the signal for profit taking. And all those people who bought for 70 hours straight from 66.10, that's them saying, you know what, maybe I'll just take my profit and call it a day.
Yeah. So, I forgot to go over it for Ethereum, but I would watch a couple key levels here for the week coming up. So we went over Bitcoin. We kind of had our key levels here. Let's just say on the, I think it was the daily. We want to see that 93.50 hold. Not a big deal if it breaks, but we want to see at least 9K hold if it does break.
Yeah.
10,250, a good level to break. Pretty good green flag. And then big green flag if 10,500 breaks bullish. Ethereum, I'm not quite confident to say that lower high on the daily is in yet, but I would definitely
Let's
watch
look at
that.
the 4 hour,
Yeah,
just quickly.
could be possibly.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's possible.
Yeah, but just for the macro stuff, so you keep an eye on the bigger picture. I want to see the level around here definitely hold 237. If you want to get a little closer, just for that earlier warning sign, you got to see 245 hold if that breaks 245.34. Little red flag, and then decent red flag here if 237 breaks. But again, you have to just mind your time frames. This is on the daily, so we could pull back, another $20 from here and still look okay on the weekly. But again, big green flags. If we can break that 285, I want to just call it 288. If that 288.41 level breaks, off to the races again, I believe, on Ethereum. And on the weekly, again, I still don't mind if this pulls back a little bit more. So
Yeah, the chart tells me that level in the 230s as support is possibly going to break.
Mm-hmm. So,
And again, that would be
yeah.
you said that would be a larger red flag. That's not a red flag on this weekly time frame. That
No,
just
on the
we
weekly
got to be
230
patient for,
breaking is not a big deal. No.
yeah, that just means we got to be patient for a couple weeks if
Yeah.
we're looking to add to a position
I
or looking
I
to
would say
move.
like this week if it breaks, keep cautious. But it really depends if you're in a position or not. If you're not in a position, I definitely wouldn't be buying that break necessarily if we got it this week. I think we're still so overextended. If we break bullish this week, then again you're going on another long streak of green weeks, and that's not necessarily always a time to buy. It's a game of musical chairs, and when you buy when there's so much green, eventually the chair can get pulled, right? So 288 looks really good if you're still in a position. Not necessarily the time to add, in my opinion, but you can keep an eye on the market and just know that it's very healthy if this breaks.
Yeah.
And again, not a big deal if the support breaks either. Just look to a couple levels down here to be buying. I would say 210-ish area would be good if 237 breaks. We have a minor support around 216, 213, a little bit of support there, probably the 12-hour charts. But yeah, I would look at 200 to 220 area relatively for Ethereum if this breaks bearish.
Yep. And that would just mean we got to be patient till probably mid-March,
Yeah,
second week, third
yeah.
week maybe.
And then Litecoin, what do we have for Litecoin here? So again, we have kind of this failed bear break, failed little double top bull break. So just zoom out to the
Kind of
weekly.
tough.
Yeah, it's a little choppy. It's not necessarily super clear. This is a
So
pretty large weekly candle here, between $80 and 66.10. There's a pretty good possibility for the rest of the week that we could just stay in this range, and I wouldn't say there's a lot of midterm. There's a good range there for volatility for like quick flips, but midterm it's not a big place I would be entering.
no, I still think that odds are fairly decent for another test of this
Yeah.
EMA cross and EMA area. So
Mm-hmm.
I think on the daily time frame, um, I forget what the level was, but I'd be looking for like this 64 to 67 or so area to potentially be tested. Can you show the daily time frame and we'll take a look at that? So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a tricky one because our price is right at 65
Mm-hmm.
and our EMA is like right below it at 64. So this would be the area of interest for me. And unfortunately, it looks like that we might get kind of like we got the break here. We might get
Yeah, it could be another little bear break without much.
yeah.
Hard to predict those things, obviously, but yeah, I don't. Litecoin isn't in an area. If someone was like, bullet to my head, should I buy Litecoin or not? I would say, I'm not crazy buying it where it is anywhere between this range of like 84 to 66, because you could be buying down here and then it breaks support, and let's say you wanted to set your stop loss here, you could be stopped out, and not necessarily mean that it would be a perfect place to stop out because we might just end up going higher. So it's kind of like the opposite of a rubber band here, where you have a level here and you're breaking lows, and instead of tightening, you're actually widening. We call it a megaphone sometimes. And megaphone patterns are just very unclear in terms of momentum and direction. So I would zoom out as far as you can to kind of find a time frame where you have clarity. The one that has the most for me is the monthly still on Litecoin. And we have not necessarily topped out on the monthly, but I definitely would look to, look to top out before this 145 area.
So let's look at LTC BTC chart. We already suspect it is weaker based on what we've seen in terms of distance from the high,
Yeah,
and it looks like it on this chart here. So
yeah, we're in a downtrend on it for sure.
the cost of Litecoin in terms of Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
you saw Ethereum, ETH, BTC had a pretty nice move. We haven't had that here on Litecoin.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting volume in the past 2 months, but the price action hasn't really followed through. Although that January candle is 26%,
Mm-hmm.
just visually, it is not nearly as forceful of a move as the ETH BTC move was.
Yeah, so let's take a look at that one real quick. Yeah, so that was a pretty giant move this month, especially in February. Um, the thing to keep in mind is like we had a real trend change here, right? We had a monthly low, lower high, higher low, higher high. LTC, almost like we broke, and we broke a pretty key level here on the monthly, going back to 2018. So I would say Litecoin is a bit of a monthly downtrend still. We broke a couple, not really lower highs here, but yeah, it doesn't
Those
look.
are levels, but they're not the most important levels. I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
really anything under this level here.
Yeah.
And if you want to be, you could pick this one, but honestly, I would pick the ultimate peak here.
Yeah.
Um, Anything under that's a lower high.
Okay, cool.
And that is many hundreds of percent away from where we are now.
All right. So we'll wrap it up pretty quick here. We're about 50 minutes in. I was saying like, oh, we should try and get these videos to like 10 minutes so people can just like drop in and learn things. But we did a really cool overview. I hope people who aren't really big into technical analysis have kind of gotten a grasp of what to look for on crypto, because the main thing with crypto is that it's very hard to understand the news. There's a lot of fake news out there for crypto. It's hard to understand if an event is bullish or bearish on things, if a hack is good for Bitcoin because there's less of it, or it's bad because somewhere out there, someone has a bunch of Bitcoin they're ready to sell. So, instead of worrying about the news a lot, which I do, but instead of covering it all the time, it's really good to have an eye and basic understanding of the charts. So things like price levels, really good to kind of understand, lower highs, higher lows, that rubber band equilibrium phenomenon we talked about, these exponential moving averages, and kind of basic candlestick patterns. If you can understand these things on a chart, you have a much better understanding of Bitcoin than 99% of people, because a lot of people will try and just predict things based off of, oh, is Bitcoin going to be the next digital gold? And the thing to know is that a lot of the action in Bitcoin is driven by price levels and patterns, which are a bit behind the scenes compared to what you see at CNBC or, Cointelegraph. So yeah. Any parting words from Matt?
Let's pull up that ETH chart again.
USD?
Yeah.
Cool.
Daily, please. So this is the most exciting pattern that I see that we've looked at in this entire little chat.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see how this breaks. And this is probably going to break by next weekend, I would imagine, when we do this again. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun to check in, and it'll be a great learning opportunity. We learned about equilibriums and the rubber band effect. We will probably see the break when we chat again. And the week after that, we'll be able to look at the follow through on that break.
Absolutely. Awesome.
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I hope it breaks bullish just for the sake of my bags. Yeah, and I'll try my best to keep people updated on my positions here. I don't obviously want to tell people how much crypto I have, but I am long Bitcoin, Ethereum. I have been for a couple months now, but definitely on this recent move on Ethereum, I've definitely lightened my position up. I haven't had a chance to quite reload yet. If this breaks bullish, I don't look to be adding necessarily right away, but I am looking, hopefully, for my case, a bear break so I can kind of start scaling back into it. But yeah. Awesome.
Sounds good to me. I would be okay with adding lower than here.
Yeah, I like it. I like the break either way. As long as there's volatility.